You can bring watercolors like this. This is a kid's set. And I'm trying to keep the tools for this class very simple, just so you don't have to order something. You can bring colored pencils or watercolor pencils. You probably have colored pencils. You can also do this with crayons or oil pastels. It will be rather difficult to do it with markers, but if you have something like Copic markers or watercolor markers, you can probably do it with those in a pinch. I was asking, the method I'm kind of teaching requires having 2 lights and 2 darks of each primary. So 2 lights and 2 darks of each primary. So six primaries. No secondaries needed. Secondaries being orange, purple, and green. So that's kind of it. Maybe a pencil, maybe an eraser, maybe a pen, and some paper. Printer paper will work, but you don't necessarily need printer paper. You can also use watercolor paper, Bristol board, anything you have. Sort of the heavier paper, the better if you're using a water media. If you're using colored pencils, then you kind of get a free break and you can use whatever you want, because water media is what is calling out for the heavier papers. Okay. Any further questions about today's materials? Here's this nice little chart we made, but Fanny said all that already. So for previous lessons, you can go to this website, pacf.org, to view previous lessons if you're just joining us this week. This was last week's color lesson where we did 2 color wheels, and we talked about purple and mixing around the color wheel. We skipped this part last week, so that's what we're doing this week. And we're also going to further explore the relationship between color and value, because literally this is kind of the way I mix color, and it's really strong, and I always want to talk about it some more. And then we'll do some more sample demo drawing, because I think there's a lot of strength in watching people actually do something. So I'll try not to talk and draw too much. This is the classroom code. So if you want to join the classroom, see lots of old drawings that I've done during this class, get easy links to previous recordings, view other stuff that I've done, that kind of thing, you can enter this code into Google Classroom and add yourself as a student, or you can just send me an email and I'll send you an invite to the class. Usually Fanny enters this code as a text at this point. You can also just contact me and I'll get you hooked up. One of my students, swimmer Susan, sent me this. She's in this class. She's probably here now. I thought it was so sweet. I thought I'd do a little unboxing. On Instagram, she posts these cute little postcards that she alters. So she sent me this altered postcard. I wanted to say thank you. It was really nice to get. They usually have a quote on them. I thought that was really sweet. So today's lesson is about the color wheel and more about these split primaries and value and color. And what I did is simply go through my favorite pages in this really marvelous book. This book is really growing on me. And something I didn't realize is that the Exploring Color book that I showed last week, that's a workbook, is a companion book to this book. So if you really want to deep dive into color and you're trapped at home, wonder who's trapped at home. You could spend a lot of time playing with this book. So these are a couple pages that I Xeroxed from this book that we're going to talk about for a while, and then we'll get to drawing. This is sort of last week's stuff, what we talked about last week. I just had the page here, so I thought I'd put it out for you for a minute. Here are my tools for the day. Let me gather up my thoughts here. So here's a split primary color wheel, and this is really, really powerful. And something I thought that would be fun to do is show you kind of how my tools fit into this model. And then we'll talk about sort of some of the hidden powers in color wheels. So I have a dark primary and a light primary for each color. I'm kind of pretending that this orange is a yellow just for today. Here's my light red. Here's my dark red, but notice it kind of lives over here rather than here. Kind of has slid over a little bit. So each of your primaries is going to have sort of a place it lives on this color wheel. It's a little different from real life. So like this one is actually over here. So notice that all my reds kind of live in that family over there. And that's just the nature of the kit that I happen to own right now, that I have on my desk to show you. And you also will have things that don't quite fit the model that you are looking at, whatever book you have or model you're looking at or comparing to what I have. And that's fine, you just roll with it. But what's really lovely about a color wheel is there are some things that are hidden inside it. And they're not hidden, it's not a secret. But it has sort of a warm and a cool side. So when you hear people talk about color and they talk about warm and cool, you can essentially split it in half along a warm and cool axis. Cool, warm. So these are all the warm colors over here, and these are all the cool colors. And warm and cool are attributes of color that we talk about a lot. And if you think especially about the Impressionists, they thought really deeply about warm and cool, and they made their paintings really beautiful using warm and cool colors. So it's also relative, right? This is a cool green, and this is a warm green. This is a cool blue, and this is a warm blue. So see how it's relative? You know, likewise, this is a cool red, and this is a warm red.
And it's Fanny. I'm going to interrupt you. I don't know why, but today it's very pixelated, and so we can't see, it's not very focused on your desk. And I don't know if that has to do with the internet connection we're getting today or your camera, unfortunately.
That's terrible. I'm sorry, the focus is so poor.
Yeah.
Because it looks good in the camera.
It looks good in the little view, but in the big view, it doesn't look clear.
It doesn't look clear. Can we get it to focus again? Focus. This is something that I don't like about Zoom, because it's a Zoom problem. I did a lot of research this week, seeing if I could use a different camera, but Zoom won't let me use another camera. What should we do?
I think, unfortunately, it's the nature of Zoom. Like you said, sometimes it has a better connection than others. So unfortunately, I think for you to realize that we can't actually read the text on anything that you're doing. So we can see what you're doing, but it's pixelated and we won't be able to read anything.
How about that?
Yeah, I can read that.
You can read that? Yes or no?
I can read cool and I can see the colors.
Okay. So warm over here and cool over there. Better?
Yep.
Okay.
If for those of you who are attending, if you switch from speaker view to gallery view, it will be smaller, but it will be more clear.
How about that?
That's
that better?
Better. We still can't read the small text, but it's better.
Oh, I wouldn't expect you to read this small text. This
much
is
better.
Yeah, this
We're
is not
getting
part of the
much better from everyone. Okay, great. I'm gonna mute myself and we can carry on.
This part of these little bits of text are not important to the lesson. Anything I write on top is part of the lesson. Does that make sense? You can give me a thumbs up or a okay or I hate this or whatever you want in the text. It's fine. I welcome all feedback. Okay. It does feel a little bit like teaching into a blank.
Yeah.
So any feedback. I feel a little bit like a pastor who wants the church to say amen just to know you're there.
Amen.
Thank you. Okay. So I was just saying that warm and cool is a relative concept, right? So this is a cool blue and this is a warm blue, right? This is a hot green and this is a cold green. So it's all very relative. And essentially Impressionism is based on those relative relationships. So when you're looking at Impressionist paintings, especially like Monet, now that I've zoomed, my tape doesn't matter anymore. You should be thinking about warm and cool and those really gentle, careful, subtle relationships. So that's one thing you see in color wheels. It's this warm and cool thing. But I'm going to change colors and make another notation. I thought I had Xerox copied my color wheel enough, but I'm not sure I did. Oh, here's one more. Cool. So here's another one. Sorry, just to be consistent, I'm turning it over. There's another axis you can split the color wheel by, and this is the super useful one. Well, they're all super useful. You can also split it light and dark. And this is also, of course, relative. So dark and light. And once again, all this stuff doesn't matter for this lesson. Superfluous. You can get the book, order it from Books Inc. and read it if you want. This is really, really useful because the color mixing that I'm teaching you has to do with using the intrinsic value of the colors to change the shape you're drawing. And so understanding that if you want to make a lime darker, you go around the color wheel to blue and maybe even all the way over here to purple and into red, dark red. If you want to make a lemon darker, maybe you go this way. If you want to make an apple darker, you go all the way over here into these dark blues and maybe all the way into a dark green. And if you want to make an apple lighter, you go sliding up over here into light yellow. So this is the idea of mixing around the color wheel. And I will demonstrate it in just a moment, and I'll bring this back into view. I got all clever with my Xerox machine, and I may have to zoom back out to show you this. Hang on. There we go. And I just Xeroxed the exact same picture in black and white. So you can see the values for yourself. Dark and light. So see how the colors have an intrinsic value. And that intrinsic value can really help you when you are mixing color. Any questions? This is more like you gotta believe me for a few minutes until I demonstrate it. I have another little Xerox sheet here. And that's this. You think, why is she showing me two strips of the same color grayscale? Here's the magic. They're not the same. I did the same magic on my Xerox copy machine. So this one is in color, and this one is my black and white setting on my Xerox copy machine. So colors have this intrinsic value. This is actually in the book. This is dark purple. So that's pretty remarkable. I really love this feature of color mixing. And the reason I'm into it is when you mix color using, taking like an orange and making it lighter and darker with a brown or a black and white, you get a very chalky effect. When you make it lighter and darker by mixing around the color wheel, and you make your orange darker by putting in some purple and some blue, and making it lighter by putting in some yellow, you get this very vibrant, high intensity, glowing, impressionist picture of an orange. So it's a pretty neat thing to look at. And with that, I think we're kind of reaching the stage of maybe doing a demonstration on this. So let's see.
There's a question about magenta, Anne.
Oh yeah, are we looking at magenta? Here's some magenta. What's the question?
Where's magenta on the color wheel?
Oh yeah, sure. Let's pull the color wheel back. Magenta is a cool red. So it's right here. It's almost purple. It's a bluish red. And I kind of want to, I don't want to really talk here. This is sort of a practica instead of a theoretica. Because we could talk about the physics of light and then the pigment of color, and it all gets very talky very quickly. Magenta is a little bit closer to the color of light when you split it into its physical parts with a prism. And like, you know how pigment is stuff you dug up out of the earth or you made in a chemical store or chemical lab? So what you split light into and what you get to paint with are two different things. And so the trick that a painter does is they take their pigments and they make them look like physical light. And it's actually really fun. So that's kind of the fun of painting. So what we're trying to do here is bridge the gap between what the physics of the outside world is like, bathed in sunlight, and what the pigments can do. Kind of interesting. I really love it. One of the things the color book looks at first, or any color book looks at first, is they compare pigments to physical light. Any other questions? So I actually have a really cute strawberry. And I'm wondering if I should turn one of my lights out, or if it will be too dark. I think it'll be too dark for my camera. And then I don't have a sense of how many of you are using colored pencils and how many of you are using watercolors. If I had a sense, I would use either watercolor or colored pencils to do this. So notice that there are no secondary colors because I don't need them. One of the powers of being a good color mixing person is that you don't need them. Of course I have them. I have some greens and some purples, but I don't need them. It's going to be fine without them. I do find that if we're trying to do this with only 3 primaries, it would come out pretty muddy looking. And I was going to talk today about 2 things that happen a lot when you're drawing. One is mud or muddiness, and one is chalkiness. And they're both sort of color problems that happen to everybody. And if you know what they are, you can put them in the text, and we'll get to them in a few minutes. Because we can talk about what they are and why they happen and how to prevent them. I find I go into almost every plein air landscape show and be like, yeah, they're both there in one or another or some or many of the paintings. And sometimes it's my painting that they're in. Like, whoops, didn't do a good job today. Okay, shall we begin? Let's start. So I mainly have a red strawberry, right? And I gotta say, it's kind of boring sitting right there being top lit. It's much prettier where I see it when I'm looking at it on my table. So I may draw it as I see it rather than as you see it. I don't know about that. Let's try. And I'm gonna draw it really big so that you can really see what's going on. So even though actual size is like this, let's just draw it about that size. Well, maybe that's too big. Let's try it that size. And am I on the desk? Let's make sure I'm on the desk. Okay, on the desk and making it sort of actual size. And then there's going to be some of these things. Notice I'm keeping my pencil really light and I'm doing my own, so I'm actually sort of following my own rules, which are mark out where it is, make adjustments early. So I made it too big. I thought about how long it would take me to shade in something this big, and I thought about how bored you would get in that amount of time. So I made it smaller, but still big enough for you to see what I'm doing. So if we stick to this idea of shaping it with color, most of the light is coming from up here and up here, just because I have my desk drenched in light so you can see it. And then because I'm going to be mixing colors, I have to, like for the leaves and things, I'm going to have to wash it in 2 colors. So I'm going to have to wash it in blue and in yellow. And again, this is one of those do as I say, not as I do. So I'm doing this really, really quickly just so you can see it all happening as fast as possible. You may wish to draw a little bit more carefully than I am doing. So I just picked up my other blue. So I did that very quickly with my 2 light primaries, green, light blue, light green. And now I'm kind of coming back in with a darker primary and putting in a few details with the darker primary. Just pretty consistent to how I actually like oil paint and things like that. And then I'm gonna use that darker blue to kind of corral what the rest of this painting is gonna look like. And I really like that there's a pretty shadow underneath it. So I'm gonna put a little bit, a hint of that shadow. And then I have 2 reds, and I'm also gonna use this color and maybe this color. I'm gonna use all 4 yellow, this orange is pretending to be dark yellow, red, and this red to color in the strawberry. And I'm just gonna make a lot of progress really fast. Something that's nice to do when you're shading, I remember we talked a little bit about contour shading, and it might be kind of fun to contour shade this a little bit. I think we also talked about sort of the meta drawing skill of, instead of drawing the thing that you can name inside your head, drawing the light and dark pattern. So not really caring that I'm drawing the shadow and the shape, because I want them to be unified anyway. There's sort of a darkish patch here where the strawberry bends. It has a core shadow, just like we were talking about before. Now I need some brightness and some bright color. Kind of wish I had taped my paper down. And then I'm always talking about contours. Sometimes the contour of a thing really helps you recognize what it is. There's this really kind of darkish bit here. And then see how, if I wanted to go even darker than this, we'll put some of this in, foreshadow here. And there's a really dark red spot here where like the sun shone on it while it was ripening. So it's a really rich color up there. And then underneath here where it's really dark, I just bounce into my blue because I'm going, once again, I'm going around the color wheel. So I've gone all the way over here and I'm going even darker into the darker side of the color wheel. Same up here. And those of you who are sort of into the details of things are like, but what about the little white spots? I would probably add those in later with a little bit of white paint. You could also sort of impressionisty in them in. And then because this is kind of the magic stuff, the other thing you can do with it, look how beautiful it gets when you drop some color in or some water into it. And you can use that to go over it again. So that's the sort of mix around the color wheel on a 3-dimensional object, which it's easiest to see on a 3-dimensional object, which is why I chose a strawberry. Something you can also do that I do with water-soluble pencils a lot is I often don't melt the sunny parts, what I would call it, the lit parts. I only melt the shadowy parts. And that seems to help make them look more three-dimensional. Because the sunny parts have those little divots of light from the paper, make them just look more together. But that means I also have to do the shadow. Which as I go into it, I notice it's not purple enough, so I add a little bit of this before I get farther along. There we go. Not so bad. So something that I notice is that parts of my strawberry are really not light enough, are not dark enough. And I may have to go in after it's dry. So notice you can make a little bit of a mark while it's wet, but not much. So I will probably have to go in here later. But in the meantime, did you guys think about the difference between chalkiness and mightiness and what they are? Anybody have a response to that one? So chalkiness, I can actually do it here because I have some white paint. Let's see. Chalkiness is when you add white to a color to make it lighter. Like take this bright red I'm putting here. You want to make it lighter, so you add something white. You get this. When you add white to a color to make it lighter, you often get something chalky. If you were to add, and it's especially sort of difficult to look at when you add white to a shadow. For some reason, that gets particularly hard to take. When you add yellow to a red to make it lighter, that is actually easier to take, easier to look at, because you're upping the intensity of the color and making it lighter. So here's kind of a nice demonstration of why. So this is plus white, and this is plus yellow. You can do the same thing with any color. So here's blue, two blues, and plus white. This is actually not really white. It's like this khaki color. It's like Naples yellow or something. Plus white and plus yellow. So it makes it lighter, but it doesn't make it chalky. You can see that here, where if I wanted to add a little bit of stuff here, especially in shadow areas, you get a chalkiness pretty fast. It can be appropriate if you're like drawing something that's sitting on a white surface. It's perfectly appropriate to put white in your shadow, but you're also going to have to re-brighten it up with something. Which kind of brings me to the next part of our lecture for the day. Oh, let me just say what muddiness is while I'm here. You guys ready? So muddiness is mixing too much of the opposite in. So muddiness happens, let me move my paper up. So mud happens all the time. And it happens when you mix two opposites together. So this bright one and this one. It's essentially how you get a brown, which is fine, but you want to be careful not to get a brown unintentionally. That's a very pretty brown. But say I wanted to mix the dark side of my strawberry and I didn't believe in mixing around the color wheel. So I was like, I'm going to make it darker by adding green. Because if I add green, then I'm going to get something pretty muddy pretty fast. I just added some phthalo green out of my fancy kit. And I made it much darker, which was good, but I also made it much muddier. It's much less bright. Contrast that with adding super secret watercolor tip. If the watercolor is still wet, you can take it right back out again. Contrast that with adding a dark purple or a dark red. You maintain the vibrancy of the paint. You might not be able to see that because of the fuzzy camera silliness. I'll continue to work this week on camera quality because I'm not very happy about that. But let me get another piece of paper and we'll talk about gamut and maybe some color swatches. So do you guys want to do a little paint along? Because this is kind of fun with whatever you've got. Let's see. Straighten it out a little bit. So here, let me make sure I'm all the way on the paper. This is essentially a little fun graph. I think I showed you guys a starting for this last week. And this is about gamut, which is everything your paint can do. So you can make a gamut chart out of anything. Whatever you've got, you can make a gamut chart. You can make one out of this or out of this. Doesn't matter what you start with. It's kind of fun to do it out of 6 pencils because you'll understand everything the pencils can do after you're done with it. So I'm going to do it with these 6. It'll be very pretty. So what you want to do is make 6 boxes on the top. Six. And 6 boxes down this side. I'm sorry if this is looking remarkably like math class. Okay. And then right here, light yellow, dark yellow, light red, dark red, light blue, dark blue. Then you have to reverse the order for the y-axis. Dark blue, light blue, dark red, light red, dark yellow, light yellow. Everybody with me on that one? You can always use a ruler, but I never use a ruler. Things usually work out okay. Notice I'm stopping my lines. There's a point in this graph where you won't need to go any farther because everything, let's see, everything after this point here is a repeat. I have it. Something like that. Okay. Let's get on with it. So light yellow, put your little sample in. And something that I kind of find fun to do is just color them all in at a time. So this whole column is going to be light yellow. So my light yellow is done. This orange is what I'm using for dark yellow, so it probably looks darker than what you're using. So it also goes here and here. That one's done. Light red goes here, 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 and here. Done. Dark red. No, I drew my outside line a little bit weird. So it's literally just a fun little chart you can make for yourself. Watercolorists often celebrate receiving or buying a new kit by making one of these out of all the colors in the kit. So you can only imagine what it's like to make one with 36 colors, because this is just 6. So there you have it. That's everything those 6 pencils can do. And since they're watercolor pencils, you get to have the fun of melting half of each one. So you can really see the mixes. I like to melt half so I can see the unmixes as well as the mixes. I feel like that one may need a little bit more light red. Feels like it sort of got taken over by the blue. All right. Any questions? Notice that I wash and damp. You may not be able to see this, but just as a practice for all you watercolorists and watercolor pencilists out there, I do wash and dip my brush every single time. Otherwise, you're going to get messy stuff. See, I just made that light blue-green. Oops. If you're not seeing big differences inside one, like that one, you may need to hit it again with whatever's missing, just to make it pooch up a little bit. So notice that I did draw my line right the first time. Everything outside below this line is superfluous. It's a repeat. There you have it. Any questions about that? It's quite fun to do this with like a box this size, right? Because you could certainly do that. Something you should be careful about is if you're doing it with a box like this box is designed to be shared by 2 students. So it's repeated colors. So don't make yourself a lot of extra work if you have a box exactly like this one. So that's one fun thing to do about color. And you can also notice that this drawing that I've done here, it also has warm and cool, right? Let me draw a few lines through it. Because once again, we have this really fun phenomenon where the colors themselves have intrinsic qualities. So here's a true magenta that you guys are always looking for. And right here, I would say this one and this one, this dark red and the 2 blues are making a pretty good purple. So good to know, right? Whereas the light red and the 2 blues are making a nice brown. So these are the kind of things you can pull out of a color swatch set. Like, oh, if I need a nice brown, that's where I find it. You're also getting 2 different kinds of green right here, and that's pretty nice. Greens are cool. Notice that one is a light green and one is a dark green, which is helpful. Let me just draw a line down here. Now I'm off my page, no doubt. Here we go. 2 greens. One light, one dark. I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but in my Google Classroom, I take pictures of all my note pages and I post them to Google Classroom, usually the same afternoon as a slide deck. You can take a look at them. What's fun is that, look at all these different oranges this particular kit is really good at making. Those are all different oranges. They're wonderful. I particularly like this sort of murky brownish one. Very cool. So yeah, and this is kind of, these 2 right here, sort of an ace neutral. I should check the time. It's 1:41. Okay. Any questions about Gamut and how to discover it and how to use it?
Can you define gamut, please, Anne? I think
Well,
I did it for you, but it's better coming from you than me.
I don't think I'm seeing the chat today. Let me see if I can pop it out. Oh, there we go. I was like, wow, these people being quiet today, but I couldn't see it. Gamut is everything your colors can do. So you know how you say run the gamut? Well, we just ran the gamut, literally. This is the gamut of these pencils. It's not the light dark spread because we haven't added the value, even though you'll notice that there is a value section, like things are light or dark inside the gamut. Gamut is often talked about inside printers, like a printer is sold based on what its gamut is. A really high quality printer has a really large gamut, and a low quality printer has a much smaller gamut. So it's essentially what the tool can do. What colors can the tool cover? Some tools don't have a true pink. Some tools have one blue, so when you're looking at different palettes to choose, you think about, does it have a turquoise? Does it have a cerulean? Does it have a magenta? So it's kind of an interesting idea. And these color swatches really test and push and pull at the gamut and see what it actually is. Does that answer the question? All right, you guys ready for another lesson? Get another piece of paper. I hope the focus is not too bad. I'm really struggling with it. I'm gonna try and buy a web camera and see if I can get my phone to use a web camera. I'll get my computer to use a web camera or something. This is not very fun. All right. Here's another really fun project. I love this. And
I'm sorry, some questions are coming in that I can't answer.
Oh yeah, let's have it.
Is pink in the gamut? And do you mix on your palette to make a watercolor gamut or glaze on the paper?
Oh, the question about is pink in the gamut? Yes, it is. If you're doing watercolor, let's see. This is pink here. This is what I would call pink. True magenta / pink. So pink is essentially dilute magenta. Pink is what we call a tint. So tint is the official word for a color with white added. And shade is the official word for a color with black added. There's nothing wrong with adding white to a color. You just have to be careful to avoid that you haven't added white to all your colors, because that's how you get things to be chalky. If you add black to all your colors, that's how you get things to be muddy. Or if you add brown to all your colors, that's how you get things to be muddy. So there's nothing wrong with tinting or shading things. You just have to watch out for the chalk and the mud. Nothing wrong with it. So if you dilute magenta, you get pink. And the word for diluting is tint. So it's right there. Pink, very pink. But yeah, it is in there. If I didn't have this dark red right here, I wouldn't have a pink. I would have an orangey color that I might be able to pull off as pink, but wouldn't really work. Any other questions? Let me see. For some reason my the chat doesn't unspool correctly for me today.
The other question is, do you mix on your palette to make a watercolor gamut or glaze on the paper?
If you're quick, you can glaze on the paper and just mix on the paper the way I did here. I'm actually going to do a little watercolor exercise just to have the watercolorist be included. So you can sort of watch it in practice. Let me see if I can just pull this into the view, and so the whole thing is on the paper. There we go. That seems reasonable. So you can mix on the palette. When I'm painting in anything, whether it's acrylic, oil, or watercolor, I tend to say you should really mix on the palette and not on the canvas. Watercolor is a little tiny bit different in that it's kind of fun to drop colors into wet paint, and that's sort of the fun of watercolor. So I would say this is one of those things that you got to answer for yourself, and just cover some paper with some paint and see what you think is best for you, because it really is sort of a how do I love to paint question, which is fun to answer. I love that kind of thing. So let me draw a couple swatch ideas here for you. Now, I think I may want to rearrange my kit a little bit. Maybe I'm going to do it like that. Because I want you guys to be able to see the mixing, but not have to watch my hand flicker back and forth across to the camera. Maybe we'll do it like that. All right. So certainly when I'm teaching oil or acrylic, I tell people to mix on the palette simply because you can't control the paint well enough without doing that, and you end up with a really muddy painting unless you do it. But you're about to see some painting happen where I really do mix on the paper, simply because this exercise calls for it. So let's do this. So this is a color exercise that I think you'll enjoy doing. And what we're going to do is go from one color to the other, and we're going to take 5 steps to get there. So let's say we're going to go from let's go from purple to yellow. And what we want in between is the gradations that happen on the way. So right here, it's going to be 50-50 purple and yellow. And then here, it's going to be 75 yellow and 25 purple. And here it will be 75 purple and 25 yellow. Once again, sorry for the mathness of this, but trust me, it's fairly useful. Let's see if I can get it to work on the fly like this. Have not practiced. Also using kindergarten paint. So I got to clean out my paint just so I'm not, there's a little bit of green in my paint, and that's sort of death to yellow. Make sure my paint is clean and liquid, not solid. Maybe I'm going to start with purple while I let the yellow marinate for a minute. So I have some nice vibrant purple here. You can see that it's soupy. You want it to be kind of the texture of milk, right? So not water, milk. And I'm going to paint one whole square 100% purple. And they're cheap watercolors, so I'm going to keep dropping pigment in just so they stay vibrant. If I'm using expensive watercolors, then I say, they're expensive watercolors, I'm going to keep dropping pigment in because they're so lovely and beautiful. So keep dropping paint in. Then I'm going to go here, and I want half and half in the middle. This is why fives are beautiful. I want it half and half. How am I going to get half and half? I'm going to keep dipping into each. So you see that I'm mixing on the paper. This is not what you do in acrylic. So then this one is going to be about 75, 25. So more pink, less yellow. So you should think of this as like we're making soup, not bread, i.e. it's not particular, it's general. So this one is pretty much all yellow, no purple. So I gotta add a little bit, not much. See how quickly it jumps into 50-50? Gotta take it back out again and add some more of this. So now what I have to do is make sure that my yellow is really, really clean. Like scrape out with paper towel clean. There we go. Take it back up to the texture of milk. And have one that is just pure yellow. So look how beautiful that is. Stunningly beautiful. So this color swatching method is really useful for kind of expanding your knowledge of the gamut of your paints or of your pastels or whatever else you're using. Because notice that the exercise we just did, this one, they get all note-takey and scratchy, you're only doing 50-50 mixes. Here we have 75-25 mixes. And so you've discovered a couple new beautiful colors with that 75-25. I expected brown between purple and yellow. That is a really nice observation, Catherine. And that's interesting because I also kind of expected brown, but what happened is this is an orangey yellow and this is a reddish purple. So inside each of these is more yellow than we expected. So we got orange, which is really interesting. And that is one really great reason to do these color swatches. You can also do them as 6s or 9s. It turns out to be really hard to do more than 5. 5 is a nice number because you can start with the 50-50 and then fill in the betweens. When I teach this to students, I find that it is, well, I don't want to wreck it. I find that it is really, really difficult to start here and go that way. It works a lot better to fill in this one and this one, then this one, and then this one. So you fill it in kind of inside out rather than starting from the left side and progressing to the right. Do you guys want to do one more? Is there a need? Let's see. Or do you want to talk a little bit? Let's see, we got 154. Let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do next week. How's that? Because we have like 5 minutes, even though I'd love to do another one. Does anyone have any requests for our last 5 minutes? And then like for our last 3 minutes, and then I'll tell you what we're going to do next week, because I sort of changed up the plan from what I said I would do last week. Also welcoming any other great questions. Let's see. What about orange to green? Oh, I can't wait. Orange. Let's see how fast I can do it. Oh, that was the wrong orange. Oops. And then a little bit here, right? This would get us some pretty, I'm going to use a really light, beautiful, pure green, like a Kelly green. Then another dunk, halvesy, halvesy, another dunk. Oh, I need very little over here, so I rinsed it. How are we doing? I think this one needs a little bit of orange. So that one gets us some, like, what an old friend of mine would call wall-to-wall ugly green, which is extraordinarily useful when you're out painting. So see how I'm mixing on the canvas and just keeping on making it better. I would say that this middle one requires the paper towel treatment because it got too orange. Wall-to-wall ugly green is what we're going for. There we go.
There's one more question, Anne.
Okay. Making colors, you pop. Yeah. So notice that these are analogous colors, right? They're next to each other on the color wheel. They go around the color wheel. So when you're making colors pop, this is something, let me pull this back. These also pop. Colors that are very close to each other that we call analogous. This is something, if you go and look at Monet's paintings, he often doesn't change the value or the intensity, but he changes the hue of the color just a little bit. I can talk about this some more next week because I got distracted by all the cool color swatching we're doing. But see how these two colors, they sort of bounce off each other and they kind of feed off each other. Let me zoom in again. So they bounce off each other, and if you put them next to each other in a painting, they kind of sing with each other. It's kind of neat. So analogous colors work really well. You can kind of see it really beautifully in, say, just in my paint palette. Look at these colors talk to each other and they seem to amplify each other. So colors that are very close to each other on the color wheel have this kind of, they sort of egg each other on. And if you include that in your paintings, that happens a lot in paintings. Let's see. Here's an example of it in a still life I completed not that long ago. Let me bring it into view. Now I gotta zoom back out again. So this is a still life I did not that long ago in acrylic. And if you look down here, see how there are purples and blues that are really close to each other, but they're analogous. They're close to each other on the color wheel. They're very similar in value, and they sort of seem to jump each other up. The same is true for these darks and light yellows here. They're analogous colors. They're close to each other on the color wheel. One is a little darker than the other, but they seem to amplify each other. And that is what's really lovely about this sort of what we call colorist color mixing, or colorism, or spectral color mixing, or full spectrum color mixing are all words that are used to describe this stuff. I just noticed, oh, that's goo, yay. Came right off. Okay. Please put the code for getting the materials before the end. Oh, you mean the class code. I think Fanny will enter it again for you. You're very welcome to join the class. Next week we can talk a little bit more about color pop. And then I also thought next week we would talk a bit about talk some more about trying to think on the fly here. So I was going to talk about atmospheric perspective today, but you know, next week I was going to talk about linear perspective. And I thought that I should just put those two topics together in the same lesson. So next week, atmospheric and linear perspective and the difference between the two and why you care about them both. I thought it would make a good lesson to just roll them together. And we'll also talk a little bit more about analogous colors and why they are so awesome. For homework, you can do this kind of a little drawing where you go around the color wheel to make something look round. And you can also do lots of the color swatching if that appeals to your mind. Some people love doing them and some people do not. The other thing I wanted to suggest for homework, there are people who love this stuff, and there are people who love this stuff enough to have made two different apps that are available on the Play Store and the Apple Play Store, and they are called these things. I love Hue and Blendoku. They're both really, really fun. You will spend too much time on them. But they're about color mixing and how color is situational and how your perception of color depends on the color next to it. Very neat stuff. I'll put the links to them on my Google Classroom as well. And in a couple hours, you'll also see slides from all my notes from today's class on the Google Classroom as well. Any other questions? I'm watching the chat line right now. Yeah. Hi, Karen. It's nice to see everybody come back each week. Hi, Julene. Nice to see you here. Excellent. Hi, Selma.
Hi, Selma. Thank you, everyone. Welcome, Sharon, a new student.
Very cool.
Hi, Jeannie.
All
right. Well, this has been great. I'm going to stop the recording. Oh yeah, thanks for putting that. I gave the link to this book earlier in the chat, the Amazon link.
Oh, cool.
Some people were asking. All right,
Yeah.
well, it's 2:03, so I'm going to close the recording.